And good afternoon, and welcome to the Thurston County Commissioners check-in with Superior Court. I'm the county chair, John Hutchings. We also have Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser. We have County Manager Ramiro Chavez and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. And we have the Superior Court Presiding Judge Eric Price. And we also have the Court Administrator, Administrator of the Courts, Pamela Hartman-Beyer. Welcome. I don't know if anybody else is joining us. Can you see anybody else, Romero?
No, sir.
Okay. So we have 1 hour for this. No decisions will be made, but we're going to just do an update on where we're going with the courts and the issues surrounding courts, especially in this pandemic. So I'm going to turn to, who do I want to turn to first? I'm going to guess, do you have anything to add, Romero?
No, this is just an opportunity for you to hear from Superior Court.
Okay. Judge, I'll give you the floor right up front.
Okay. Well, I don't have any hard agenda to discuss today, but in terms of an update, we are in the middle of a big week for us. We had decided earlier, some 2-3 weeks ago, that this was the week starting June 1 where we would begin to open our main campus courthouse a full 8 hours. We had previously, if you recall, been only open in the mornings and only doing essentially in custody criminal matters. And that had started in the middle of March and had a couple of extensions, but it ultimately was extended until June 1st. So we had been spending the 2 previous weeks very quickly trying to anticipate what challenges the opening full time were going to present to us, working with our stakeholders and working through a number of concerns that we and they had about opening up full time. The purpose of opening up full time was to begin to grow our calendars to not just address in custody criminal matters, but also to begin to address out of custody criminal matters. We had, and I think I updated you last time, we had already had some civil work that was added to our calendars 2 weeks ago. The civil judges have been doing civil motions on Friday mornings for the last 2 weeks. We have our third one tomorrow. And that's all being done either on the pleadings or by telephone. So it did not involve increasing our presence here in the courthouse like this week did with out of custody criminal matters that we began doing on Monday. So we had a number of subcommittees we had convened with our stakeholders in anticipation of our opening full time on June 1st. We had a committee specifically for signage. We had a committee for flow within the courthouse building, building 2 here with our main campus. And then we had a committee to look specifically at the logistics within the courtroom. How are we going to move about the courtroom if when we started evidentiary hearings with witnesses and more parties than would typically be involved in just an in-custody calendar. We still have not have done jury trials. We don't anticipate any jury trials to be done until at the earliest July 6th. That date comes to us from the Supreme Court. I think I talked about that last time, that July 6th was the date in which you shouldn't be within the state doing a jury trial. So we have, at this point, postponed any jury trials until July 6th. So it's been, it was a whirlwind to get ready for this week. There was, as I mentioned, a lot of concerns folks had. We made some changes, some dramatic changes to our calendars to try to alleviate the possibility of having too many people come into the courthouse. We have, and I can go into details if you want, but we have changed both the type of calendars we're doing and the way we're doing them to try to avoid having too many people roll in and to try to stagger entry into the courthouse. The clerk, for her part, her office is mostly closed. They have only appointments that they are seeing people, which has, I think the numbers bear this out. Pam knows those numbers, but has really significantly reduced the number of individuals coming into the courthouse. We have well, we're on Thursday and now just past noon. And I think collectively the experience has been one in which the sort of the sky is falling prognosticators haven't turned out to be the case. We have, I think, successfully had lower numbers than we had feared. I think we have the lawyers are for the most part recognizing the need to do a number of things to discourage additional unnecessary people from coming to the courthouse to begin with, but also for themselves behaving in a way that socially distances and uses masks and so forth. I've been on the bench for several calendars this week. I was on the bench all morning actually, and my observation, and I think it's consistent with the observations of other judges, is I think with one exception, everybody's been masked up, and that people are sort of self-distancing. We are still working, by the way, on improved signage within the courtrooms to make it clearer where to sit and where not to sit, so as not to violate social distancing of 6 feet at this point. We have already tried to do the best we can to figure out the occupancies of the various courtrooms when we have that information available to the judges. Ultimately, we hope that the calendaring changes we've made will alleviate, and the scheduling we're doing with our courtrooms will avoid having too many people in the courtrooms themselves. But ultimately, the judges will be policing that to the extent that they can, with certain expectations on the numbers of people in the courtrooms. We've asked the lawyers, and a little bit of a change of operation for them, but we've asked the lawyers that if they are aware of any particular hearing that has a number of individuals coming or interested in it, to let us know. In yesteryear, they used to do that some of the time, but now it's really mandatory that we can see coming in advance a hearing in which there'll be 20 people with interest, as opposed to a typical onesie or twosie. So meanwhile, our family and juvenile court, they've been running full time this is their week 3 of doing that. They are, I think, done an admirable job of taking their calendars and really infusing them with a lot of Zoom and remote hearings. Although they've been open to the public, they too, I think, have seen lower numbers because of the number of hearings that they're doing by remote access. And given the number of self-represented parties, there's been some challenges with respect to notice and so forth. But I think as a whole, FJC has been pleased with the progress they've made in keeping people out of the courthouses as they go about their calendars. If I didn't mention it, I should. The Supreme Court did come out with a third emergency order on May 28th. So that was, I think, last Thursday or Thursday.
Yeah.
That emergency order was very similar to their second emergency order in terms of dates, telling us essentially to try to open by June 1 and no jury trials to July 6th. But they did, within that order, have made it clear, more clear, I should say, that they view the courts as essential, and that the operations are essential, and that in balancing the need to do some of these things versus the risk in doing these things, I think the order is a reflection of this, like everything else is getting phased, but I think it's a reflection of this phasing in of, you guys really need to work hard at doing more as opposed to less. So that's a mouthful. I'm sure it generates some questions.
Well, I'd like to just respond to some of that. You said, number one, that the public are coming in, masking up in mass, which is good, and self-regulating when it comes to distancing. That's good. It just reminds me that what once was very strange has become very familiar to us, and what was very familiar to us is now seems strange. And so you have some roads to go still with opening up the courts all the way, and with the resumption of trials July 6th. That's just a month away if it happens. Are you currently able or unable to resume a jury trial in your current setting with adjustments?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something that we looked at when this all started. And this is part of information that have been kind of ongoing discussions with Robin and Romero. But the we are able to do, we believe, with the current directive of 6 feet with masks, to do one jury trial. And I think we've got the facilities to do one trial with our current configuration. That is not optimal, obviously. And just last Friday, I sat in on a webinar in which the state is looking at jury trials. There's multiple committees that the Supreme Court and the Administrative Office of the Courts have put together to try to provide statewide guidance on jury trials. And they are looking at a number of things that may change that conclusion. In this new world, you don't like the news, you wait 5 minutes and it changes. So it's in fact, one comment that was made, which I found very interesting, because we are preoccupied by 6 feet and what that means, with where we can seat people and how many people can be in a space. But there was a suggestion, and again, I hesitate to say this out loud, but it was suggested that maybe some guidance is coming that with an N95 mask, we could have jurors closer than 6 feet. Even if we could cut that 6 foot number in half, that would radically change our ability to have a jury trial and do it more comfortably. Our problem right now is we have one big courtroom. We were designed, back, well, obviously without social distancing being a consideration. So we have one big courtroom. Folks, it's 102. Folks are familiar with it, no doubt. If we use that for a trial, which is really the only courtroom we can comfortably put a jury trial and a jury in socially distanced. And of course, they can't sit in the box like they normally would in that courtroom. Yeah. They have to be spread out within the well of the court. If we were to use that for a jury trial, we lose the availability to use that courtroom for all of our other criminal calendars that do have a lot of public coming into them. So we could use that for a jury selection, but then the effort would be to try to get it out of that courtroom into one of our other courtrooms. We only have one other courtroom that potentially we could set a 13-person jury for. That's one of our upstairs courtrooms. If we can't do that, then we lose 102. And if we lose 102 for our other calendars, all of a sudden all our omnibus pretrial calendars and arraignment calendars, all those are a lot more problematic to run. So our real desire is to try to get a jury trial out of 102. If we could change the math in terms of distancing, which we can't do yet, we know that, but if we could, that would really change that analysis. So at this point, we can do one trial. At this point, we're expecting 6 feet of distance. Boy, if that can change, and we would love it.
Can you put in perspective for us and for the public, anybody watching, that you're able only to accommodate one jury trial at a time? How does that compare with how many did you have pre-COVID? How many were you able to do simultaneously? And then what is your backup on jury trials?
Well, I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of the backup on jury trials. I think at some point with an update, a month or two ago, I had those numbers in front of me, and just even moving jury trials from the end of March through April into May, we're in the hundreds in terms of trials that were scheduled. Now, okay, the first part of your question is important. How many trials could we be doing if we didn't have this problem at all? How many were we doing in, say, November of last year? And the answer to that is basically 3. And I say 3 because we could technically do 4 because we have the space for 4. We rarely had 4 jury trials going at a time. But so our typical load was 3. But we occasionally had 4. If you had a bench trial in there, you could maybe add a 5th. But so that's where we've gone from basically 3 to 4 to 1. And that's sort of similar to our sister counties. I don't have the numbers in front of me of Pierce County, but they basically had 18 that they could do, and now they're down to 4 or 5.
Jeez.
So they've dropped, and I think all of the counties are struggling with the same thing, and also exploring space in addition to what's in the courthouse. And I know that those discussions continue here as well. I understand Pierce County may be walking back a little from exploring offsite space, but I don't. That was just based on an offhand comment by their court administrator at a meeting I was privy to last Friday. So,
Okay. What I'd like to do is have Pam fill in any gaps, and then I'll turn it over for questions from my seatmates and anybody else. Go ahead, Pam.
I think Judge Price covered it nicely, and I'm just here to answer any questions you have.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? I'm waiting for hand. Okay, go ahead, Gary.
On your potential change from 6 foot to 3 foot, have you or did you install plexiglass possibly between those seating arrangements? And would that help? I mean, we've used it around the rest of the county, you know, in counters and such. I'm just asking that question.
mm-hmm. Well, we haven't done any sort of analysis of the courtrooms of what the world looks like if we could go from 6 to 3. And I actually heard that there is some potential rumors of a 3 foot distance coming from CDC. And I don't know if that's just myth or what. In fact, I probably shouldn't say anything because I heard it anecdotally from a person who heard it from a person who heard it from a person. But what we already have some plexiglass installed through facilities in Robin's Help. We've had some plexiglass installed in the courtrooms. Specifically right now, the plexiglass is protects the clerk station. You know, in our courtrooms, we have we have the judge sitting there, we have the podiums for the lawyers, and then we have the clerk and the clerk's employee sitting to our left usually, and they interact with the lawyers all the time. They're handing stuff to them. And the clerk's office felt, and understandably and rightfully so, that some sort of separation from them, from that interaction that was recurring throughout the day, really, would be useful. So I think all of the courtrooms currently have plexiglass with protecting the clerk station on one side, and then some provisions for sort of stanchions and rope. That's not the term for it, but to prevent people from circumventing the protection those plexiglasses provide. So that's already been done. We have made a recent request, and this is a result of the work of the Courtroom Flow Committee. This, if you recall, was the committee that's designed to address with the lawyers' concerns mostly and the clerk's concerns about the way things work in the courtroom, that there'd be additional use for plexiglass in several of our courtrooms for protection of the witness stand. And the reason for that is witnesses are often approached with exhibits and with questioners during evidentiary hearings. And in the course of an evidentiary hearing, the lawyers felt that there would be a lot more protection both directions between the witnesses and the lawyers if there was plexiglass in that case. We just had a discussion this week about whether that would be prudent for a trial. And I think there's some issues introduced in a trial that are not there in what's we typically refer to as an evidentiary hearing. When I say evidentiary hearing, I mean like suppression hearings, suppressing of evidence, Miranda type hearings that happen pre-trial. But if you had an actual jury trial, then you've got this, even if it's clear, you've got a barrier between a jury and the witness. I'm not sure that the Board of Judges was comfortable in saying that's something that we would want to see happen in all jury trials. But you don't have a jury in an evidentiary hearing, so that's where we've decided to ask for it. I think it's been permitted, I think, or approved, to have additional plexiglass protecting witnesses from lawyers. But apart from that, Commissioner Edwards, I want to address your question directly. We have not looked at what we could do for plexiglass with a 3 foot barrier. We also have not looked at plexiglass for individual jury members. And I think there's I'm aware of some discussions in other counties about that. I think of I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself, maybe not, but the old Get Smart where they had the cones of silence that came down individually over everybody's head, which was a great idea until no one could communicate because They were the cones of silence. But we've thought about something along those lines, putting little boxes for jurors, but that's not something those discussions haven't got down very far down the tracks, primarily in part because of, we understand that's a very aggressive remodeling with the limited resources for plexiglass. So
I guess,
I'll just add real quick, Gary. As of just moments ago, the CDC, they're not even hinting at anything be reduced below 6 foot distancing.
no,
Not
but
even a hint. Go ahead.
you know, when we first started going into this phase business from the governor's office, it was one case in 300,000. You know, we argued that ought to be a per capita, and now it's to 25 in 100,000. So, I mean, when you make suggestions, I think maybe before you made that construction commitment, if you asked the health officer at the state level or whomever you're coordinating with, well, what about if we could we get it to be 3 feet if we put a barrier? Just a weird suggestion, but what about district court? You say you can have, you used to be able to have 4, now you can only have 1. How does district court fit in there? If district court's having a trial as well, I know it's a different building, but jury selection and those kind of things, does that disrupt your potential?
are you asking whether or not we could utilize district court as a space?
Well, no, probably they wouldn't have space, but when they're having a jury trial, for an example, do they do their jury selection over here in this building, and does that run into problems, or?
How can they even do one? I think is the question.
Well, yeah, I mean, how can you do one? That's not even considering district court, so.
They don't have 102.
Yeah, and we do use, and we have used, 150, is it 156, 152 over there, building
152.
Yeah, for jury assembly.
Yeah.
And then they come over here for jury selection. And I know that the jury assembly, they utilize our jury coordinator and our jury assembly services for district court. So that's commingled. So they sort of have everybody come together, they log them in, and then they peel off some for district court and peel off some for us. They've got the same issues in terms of running a trial. They have only space for, they've got very small space because they're set up for 6-person jury trials, not 12. And so their jury boxes, if you distance, I don't know how they make it work. And they don't even really have a jury deliberation room. They've got a lunchroom that they use, but their trials are also much shorter. I mean, their trials are typically 1 day. I know they do a number of them, but they're 1-dayers. Our concern too is, in looking at the backlog, we are realistically looking at just in custody jury trials for in custody criminal jury trials. And if you do just in custody criminal trials, you've got a lot of other concerns with safety that you wouldn't have with a civil case or an out of custody criminal trial, and they typically last a long time. Our criminal trials, actually our civil cases take a long time too, but some of the more serious cases, the ones that are backlogged because they've been in custody a long period of time, they're sex cases or serious, Class A felony cases, and you're talking about locking up a courtroom, whether it's 102, and particularly ominous if it's 102, but you're locking up a courtroom for weeks with one trial. So if we do one trial at a time, it may mean 2 trials a month. It may mean 1 trial a month. Because you only have space for the one. And when we're able to do 3, you may have one trial going for 3 weeks, but you've rolled 3 or 4 other trials in that same period of time because you've got those other courtrooms. So that's one of that's one of the heavy lifts we're going to have to figure out when and if we do start on July 6th. Do we prioritize a 4-week trial that has guys been in custody a long period of time, guy or gal, or do we get more bang for our buck to take, 4 separate cases that could go in lieu of that? And that's just some difficult decisions we're going to have to make, depending on our what the guidance is at the time.
How about the West Side Mall? Are you talking at all about looking at that possibility? All right.
Well, we do have a committee set up for offsite jury space, and I know that there's a meeting this afternoon with Robin and Romero. Chris Helmer's involved in that project and trying to explore some of those other alternatives.
Commissioner Mensah, any questions?
What can we do to help you, Eric? Is there anything that the commissioners could do that would assist all the different difficult decisions and processes that you've got in the works? I appreciate all the subcommittees. You and I talked last week, I think, or the week before, and prior to that, I was like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna get all this work through? And then literally like the next day, I was like, the court has set up all these different subcommittees and they all seemed right on point. So I'm hoping that they're getting the problems worked out, but just if there's anything you need from us, please let us know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Commissioner. I do. There is one issue that you and I talked about independently that I should mention in this meeting as well. One of the things I didn't mention was another committee regarding increasing our capacity with Zoom hearings. And I'm happy to say that that's really moved forward quickly in the last week as well. We're looking at expanding Zoom for preliminary appearances and arraignments. And those are the two hearings at this point. Pam, is there a third?
Potentially out of or in custody omnibus.
Yeah, and the challenge with doing Zoom hearings, and obviously we're all really comfortable now with Zoom, but the challenge is on criminal calendars in particular is citing documents and moving documents from one place to another. And so you hear about different courthouses doing different Zoom meetings. A lot of those are hearings in which, like a civil hearing, you just don't have any paper moving. So there's been a lot of challenges, and I think just tomorrow we're having a stakeholder test period, and then tomorrow afternoon the judges are going to work through a test period. So we're expanding our Zoom capability on those two calendars, which will really be not only good for the court, but good for the practitioners as well. But no, I appreciate it, Commissioner. We appreciate the support that we're getting. We're working through it. We did meet with Dr. Yu virtually last week after she sent her masking directive to try to probe a little bit more deeply how what she said affected us here in Building 2, and so that's been good. We're just technical assistance is what we would love, because we're sort of figuring it out as we go along. Of course, the more as you figure it out as you go along, you realize that's what everybody else is doing too. So,
Hey, Judge, I'm trying to envision a jury trial with Zoom, and that can't be done, can it?
I actually saw, I saw a recording of something in Texas that was billed as a Zoom trial, jury selection for a Zoom trial. And it turned out what it was is Texas has this bizarre sort of state-sponsored sample trial. I don't know. It's almost like a consulting trial. It's like a alternative dispute resolution where you get a jury to try your case without any witnesses, and you get an actual jury to make a decision before it actually really goes to a real trial. I mean, if I was a lawyer, I would love it, but really expensive for the state to set up a process through which they subpoena people for essentially a advisory trial. But they were pleased with how that worked. But again, and I was excited when I saw it. And then when you drill down a little bit, you realize they're not doing witnesses. They're not doing everything that has the trappings of a real jury trial. And I think probably people are in different places on the spectrum of their openness to doing a trial by Zoom, witnesses by Zoom. We've got a number of family law matters, for example, in which you have witnesses appearing by phone. Judges typically have some discretion to have witnesses appear by phone. There's nothing, in fact, I would imagine Zoom would be more ideal than that. But actually having jurors sitting in a Zoom type of environment, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I have a hard time wrapping my head around how that works. So much of jury's decision making happens with nuance. I mean, Commissioner Menzer knows this, having tried cases. I mean, juries pick up on weird things, and if it's not where the camera's looking, I don't know how you have a fair trial.
My concern was with, let's share the screen and show the jury this piece of evidence. And they can't touch it, they can't smell it, see it, touch it, taste it. You know what I mean? I thought that'd be kind of weird with presenting evidence to a jury that might be critical in any jury trial.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't mean to exclude the other two commissioners. Both of you have ample experience with litigation too, and trials in court, and you know full well that the value of and the importance of what we consider to be a jury trial involves an awful lot of nonverbal communication and a lot of sort of macro viewing and a lot of micro viewing, all of which is compromised when someone else is making the decision of what view you get. Now, is this? Do I have to set that aside because I've had biases developed in my head about what a jury trial means for the last, 30 years of practice? Maybe. I guess I'm not willing to go there yet.
Yeah. Very interesting. Pam, anything yet?
No, I guess I'd just say there's a statewide committee looking into issues like Judge Price has identified, and I think they're going to give us what they think the best practices are going to be in this new world. So if there is an opportunity for some sort of remote jury services, we're going to hear about that from this group that's putting a ton of resources in right now and time.
Yeah, and I would add to that for example, one of the issues they're talking about is the use of preemptory challenges. Preemptories for lawyers have been, for eons, a very jealously guarded right and privilege. But there is a.
You know what that is, Ty? Ty, are you aware of that? Okay. Go ahead, Judge.
but what they're talking about on the civil side, it's statutory. On the criminal side, it's by court rule. So there's a concept, active discussion on these committees on the statewide level to talk about either getting rid of them or severely limiting them. And if you did that, you would actually reduce the number of people you had to bring in for a jury pool. So those are the kind of things they're trying to work through to see if they could have some reforms or some improvements or some temporary changes that would make it easier on what we all assume and yesterday was required.
Okay. Commissioner? Romero, anything? Robin, anything?
No.
It's been a good discussion. Are we wrapping it up then?
Yeah, if nothing else to be discussed, we can
I guess we are.
use the extra time.
Judge, thank you very kindly. Pam, thank you very much for joining in, obviously, and Robin as well. And then we're adjourning this meeting.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.